The work session of December 6, 2017 will come to order. First agenda item is ordinance number 1924, an ordinance of the Mayor and City Council approving map amendment application number 880 to amend the planned unit development plan for redevelopment of the Patuxent Golf Course into a residential community and providing an effective date. Christian, you have the floor.
Good evening. The applicant, who is the new owner of the Patuxent Greens Golf Course, is seeking map amendment approval to amend the approved PUD plan. The site was annexed into the city in 1981 via the first annexation of 1981 and placed into the planned unit development zone. Approximately 267 acres of land was a part of that annexation. And during that time, an improved site plan was also approved, which included various types of dwelling units, office uses, retail, and recreation facility uses. The golf course was known as Laurel Pines Country Club and consisted of 191.71 acres and is currently located at 14415 Greenview Drive. However, the name was later changed to Patuxent Greens Golf Course. Over the years, there has been some amendments to the approved PUD plan as well as 2 map amendments approvals. If the applicant obtains map amendment approval, they will continue the appropriate approval process to redevelop the Patuxent Greens Golf Course into a residential community of up to 450 single-family and townhouse dwelling units. The applicant's attorney, Bill Shipp, is here to share a presentation of the proposed plan and answer any questions that the council may have.
Thank you, Christian. Bill, the microphone's on and you have the floor. State your name and address for the record, please.
Thank you, Council President. For the record, my name is Bill Shipp. I'm with the law firm of O'Malley, Miles, Nyland, and Gilmore here in the county. And got it. Is that better? Thank you. We're here tonight on behalf of the applicant. I do have my client here with me. I'd like to introduce him to the council, if I could, just briefly, and then we'll get on with a presentation.
Hi, good evening and happy holidays. My name is Alan Cohen. I purchased, first I'm a third generation Washingtonian and a developer, obviously. I purchased Patuxent Greens July of this year, obviously with the vision of developing it into a residential community. We have worked very hard with the staff and my team as well to come up with what I think is a wonderful plan, very thoughtful, very well thought out. Obviously, we have some hurdles that we have to obtain, and we are here tonight just to show you our vision, and hopefully we could field some questions, and hopefully at the end of the day have favorable approval. Thank you.
Again, thank you, Council President, members of the council, Mr. Mayor. We would like to run through a overview of the project. It is a visioning exercise. We know this is a work session. There won't be any official action tonight, but certainly we wanted to give you an overview of what we're thinking about with the property. Of course, many of you, probably all of you, know the golf course was on the market for many years. It's been in a situation of economic challenge, and we're looking to bring it to the next phase. We've been working very hard with the city staff, and immediately upon purchasing the property, my client and his team have been meeting with members of the city to get feedback, to talk about issues, to talk about challenges in that area. It is a new development that always brings some challenges in itself, but we're hoping to work together, certainly with the city and with the neighborhood as well. So we want to give you an overview of what we call a vision, because as you know, obviously the first step, if we're successful in getting your approval, would be to allow us to amend the PUD plan. It would not approve any specific units or lots. It would set out the stage for us to go to the next phase. And at that phase, we would be more specific in terms of layout. But we know that generally when you come requesting a redevelopment of a property, people want to know what are you thinking? What is it going to look like? What does it feel like? And so we've been spending a lot of time and effort on that. And we have members of our team here tonight as well. We're here to obviously take questions, but also take notes because we know we'll be back to you. And we want to be able to hear your concerns and suggestions, and we'll keep working. I do want to run through some slides. The first one is just a site location. You're all familiar with the location, but highlighted in red is the golf course property, which includes a lot of open space, but also a lot of developed land as a golf course facility as well. Golf course, of course, looks green, but it's a developed site. The next slide, we start getting into some of the visioning concept of what the feel of this proposed community might look like. And I'm going to take you through some slides that show you in more detail. This is again, a site location slide, which shows you the existing golf course, but also a large area of forested area to the north, which we are retaining, not touching, not developing. And also, it's a little bit hard to see, but there's a little notch out in the red outline that goes around the existing office building on the parking lot by the city's pool facility. That is not part of our land, and it's not part of our proposal. This is what we call a bubble plan, which is really what we submitted for the PUD revision, which shows you areas of where potential pods of development would be within the project. You see in darker yellow is areas that we would envision for townhomes in different sizes and different styles that would be located centrally to the property where the water facilities are that we're hoping to retain in some lake configuration. And then the lighter yellow are the single family areas, and I'll go into some more detail on those as well. But you'll also notice a lot of green space, and that is retained green area that will be a large part of open space for this project, which will not only exist as open space, but also as potential recreation area for the community. And I'll explain that too. This is a slide that shows you in a little more detail the pods of development with some potential networks for trails, and the existing ponds are shown how they overlay on the development pods. The existing ponds for the golf course are not stormwater management facilities or not wetlands. They're water features for the golf course in a technical sense. And the next slide go back to that. Okay. Let me go back to this one. I'm sorry. This slide shows you again the circulation of the main road into the property, and that would be the main spine road in purple. It also shows you a circle that is typically included with development to show you a half-mile walking distance from the site. Again, an overview slide that tells you some of the visioning. Notice that what we're trying to stress here is a lot of naturalized planting, a lot of the most advanced stormwater management techniques, which we use things like rain gardens and other features to capture stormwater management in an attractive aesthetic way throughout the community. This slide is dealing with one of the big questions about the property. This blue area is the current floodplain for the area. And there's a couple very important things about it. The one that's very obvious to you is that the golf course is in the floodplain. And we would be required to get approval to alter the floodplain to bring the development areas out of the floodplain, which we have been in discussions with MDE about. They're familiar with this concept because there's a lot of golf courses that are going through this kind of next stage of their development. The other thing that's very important to notice, and it came up early on in our discussions with the city, is that a number of the existing homes in that neighborhood are in the floodplain. And this is because of the FEMA maps more than a technical or a situation on the ground in terms of flooding. The FEMA maps are not necessarily as exact as they could be, but it's up to the individual property owners and developments to address the maps. So the next slide shows you our proposal for bringing the development envelope of the golf course out of the floodplain. And essentially, we would do that by leveling the upper portion and having the back portion be lower and retain in the floodplain. And so essentially, the upper portion would be leveled as opposed to sloping down into the floodplain. And one of the key things about that is you notice not only does the golf course come out of the floodplain, but all of those homes in the existing neighborhoods come out of the floodplain. We've met with representatives of the two HOAs there and talked to them about this concept to let them know about it. And I'm sure they're talking to their community as well. We think this is a way that one of the benefits of this project may be to help the existing community come out of the floodplain in terms of the FEMA maps. And the very real impact of that is that, from my understanding, that all of those houses in the floodplain have to buy flood insurance at some significant cost. And we think that by amending these maps, we'll be able to address not only our proposed development, but the existing homes. We'll have to work in connection with the city to work on the FEMA maps, and it might solve that problem for the existing community as well. I would say this is not just a drawing. This is something that the engineers have worked on. It's been calculated. It's been computed in accordance with engineering standards, with MDE standards, and we are working through with MDE to review these maps for the eventual development of the property or visioning of the project. We really see it as a community, not just another enclave of houses. This is a layout that shows the housing layout of the proposed development and the retained ponds. The ponds towards the front of the property, we're hoping to retain as a water feature, an amenity for the community. We would have a spine road with houses on them. We've put singles next to singles in terms of the existing neighborhood. And we've also included a trail network around the project into the open space area to provide almost a 2-mile trail link that could be coordinated not just for our neighborhood, but for the existing community as well, if that's something the existing communities would like connection to. And of course, again, the forested area to the north is retained and untouched. As I mentioned, there's a plan for extensive open space, program passive recreation, trails, pocket parks. It would be recreation for the community to sustain the community itself, so it wouldn't be impacting outside facilities in existing neighborhoods. I know there's a city facility there as well that contains a pool, but we would have a clubhouse and a pool facility within the community as well for the new residents. This one shows a little more of the trail network you see in red, which shows it kind of going around the perimeter of the back. It also, it may be hard to see from that distance, but goes up through the lake features and then circles around to the front of the project. And there's a couple places where we could see it connecting to existing trails or sidewalks in the existing neighborhood. Again, if that is something that's seen as a benefit to the community. I know there's a trail existing that goes along the edge of the condominium project that exists, and that we could easily connect to that trail link that exists already. Now we get into some of the housing styles that are proposed, and these are real models of houses that we have with the builder that my client is in conversation with, that's committed to the project. These, of course, are the townhomes. We have 22-foot, 24-foot, a mixture of townhomes, and then single families as well. This shows you a zoom in of the entrance road. We would plan to help channel the traffic into the site by extending the boulevard treatment of Clubhouse Boulevard. Currently, there's not a well-established entrance road there. It just kind of comes into the parking area, and we would establish a dualized road with a median at the entrance to help channel the traffic in and out. We would retain the parking near the city's facility, the pool facility. See that in the lower part, and also next to the existing office building. And then you see the asterisk, blue asterisk is the area where the existing clubhouse is, and we're looking at that being an area where we could incorporate the recreation facilities for the community as well. This slide shows you the edge along the existing multiplex condominium and the buffering that we're building in to that site. It is extensive in terms of green area between the back of our houses and the homes to the north, and also is, I think, a more attractive situation than the existing asphalt parking lot that exists along that area now. And then this is the area where the single families exist and would match up to our community. And this is at the southern edge at the front. And we see that we have single families proposed in the light yellow, fronting or backing onto the backs of the single families adjacent that exist. And then the townhouses transition to the north, and that backs onto the city's property, the recreation park and city facility. So we have singles next to the singles. We actually have some singles next to the multifamily or townhouse condominium portion that exists as well. This is a streetscape view of the entrance that I described as the median entrance into the project. It's meant to be attractive in the sense that it has a curve to it. That provides kind of a nice visual element. It's also envisioned to have a lot of street trees and street lights, of course, for safety, but also plantings in a more naturalized setting. And then you can see in this slide the interrelationship between townhouses to your right of the slide and then single families on the left, and how those would interrelate. And those single families on the left back onto the existing condominium sector, just to orient. This is one of the lake features within the project that we talked about, and you can see the walking trail, jogging trail around the lake area. Again, the naturalized planting treatment of the edges of the lake and around the site extensively. This is not only in a sense, a less manicured look, a more naturalized look, but it's also more in keeping with current stormwater management regulations and the way that the state and the county and the city's folks, public works, like to see stormwater management done, rather than having a big open pond with no landscaping around it. The stormwater management treatment is interspersed throughout the project. This is a streetscape view, which on to the right in the background would be one of the lakes, and to the left is a fronting part of the residential on the street. And this is a cul-de-sac within the community. Typical approach would include, again, naturalized planting in the center of that cul-de-sac. It might provide a rain garden, stormwater management type treatment throughout the project, again, scattered. And this is an area where we would have some of that passive recreation. We don't foresee big ball fields. We don't see organized recreation within this, but having some green space where people could go out and do stuff in the open areas. They might play ball, they might play frisbee, they might take their kids out there, picnic, whatever. But you can see the houses would have their backyards and then a fenced area and then an open area that would be a common area. I want to say also that when I talked about the buffers between the houses and the existing development, beyond the backyard of the house, there will be this buffer to the existing area that will be placed in a separate parcel and owned by the homeowners association. So it won't be allowed to be developed as part of the home that is along that edge. It would be open space managed by the homeowners association. And then this is another slide again that shows you the lake. I do want to come back to two questions regarding the floodplain and stormwater management. Again, we think that by proposing our alteration to the floodplain that would address the existing situation will bring the development pad out of the floodplain and will bring the surrounding neighborhood. There's a difference between floodplain and stormwater management and water on a site. You know, the difference between a 100-year event and a daily operational management of stormwater management. And the project includes both. We have to deal with the floodplain issue and we have to deal with stormwater management. Right now, as a golf course, it's not designed to have any stormwater management, which seems counterintuitive because there's ponds throughout the golf course, but the golf course is not graded and designed to drain into those ponds like a development or a neighborhood would. Because in a lot of cases, keeping the water on a golf course when there's rain helps irrigate the golf course. Now, of course, it's not wet all the time because otherwise you can be having golf out there. But it's not technically drained to use those ponds for stormwater management. With this new development, we would redesign the grading of the site so that all of the water within the development envelope would drain into stormwater management facilities, which would be dispersed throughout the project because that's the way the regulations are now. But also would make sure, because regulation requires it, that we handle our stormwater, both from quantity and quality, in a way that is managed on site and does not impact adjacent properties. We would not be allowed to drain onto the adjacent property. And in fact, we think we'd be correcting a floodplain issue that exists, which may be more of a map issue than a physical issue on people's lots. So again, I want to say that we're here to listen. We're here to get feedback. We hope to enlist your support as we move forward. This is a visioning exercise, and I want to say that because we've shown you a lot of things that people may decide, well, they've already fixed the way this thing is going to be laid out. This is the way we think it's going to be laid out, but we're not at the level of engineering yet to really lay it out. We will be coming back to you again at that phase of development. We have a final development site plan that would be required once we move forward. And then we would be back again and say, here's how we fine-tune the development envelopes based upon what we see on the ground and based upon what we've heard in terms of feedback from the city and from the neighborhood. We've had a couple of meetings with neighborhood representatives. We look forward to meeting with them throughout the process, not just this process, but as the project moves forward. And we're constantly meeting with staff. We appreciate Christian coordination of all that and input to us. And we really would appreciate your feedback, but also ultimately, hopefully, your support. With that, we're here to answer questions and take notes.
Okay. Let me start with Mr. Smalls. Fred?
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, Mr. Shipp.
Good evening.
I think I'll start, because I have a number of questions and just sort of general concerns. You mentioned at the end of your presentation that you've had meetings with neighborhood representatives. What's been a tenor of those meetings? I mean, what's the feeling of the neighboring community? Because that's a huge concern for me.
Sure. You know, We met first with a board member of the condo section and their attorney. They were very attentive and wanted, of course, very interested in hearing what we had to say. Obviously, they want to know more about the project. The people we spoke to, we didn't speak to everybody, so, I don't want to represent that we've heard from the whole community. But the response was that we want to know more about it. We obviously will be concerned about the floodplain question because that's been an issue for us as residents. And also traffic is always a concern with any project and any development. And we told them we have a traffic study that we've submitted, which makes an initial evaluation of the traffic situation, recommends a couple improvements that we might have to do. But again, that would have to come back again. So it wasn't an outright no. It wasn't like, yes, we're all for you. It was more like, we hear you and we want to know more and keep us involved. We had a follow-up meeting just this week, which had representatives of the single-family neighborhood, the board, three representatives, and then another member of the condo section came to that meeting as well. I think that was a fairly positive meeting. Interested in what we were proposing. I think they're still going to have questions and want information as we go forward. We did talk about some of their concerns with traffic. They were also very interested in the floodplain correction issue and thought that might be a good thing. The condo association, I know that's a big bill for the condo. So, I'd say not a bad meeting, a good dialogue and a good conversation back and forth, but certainly they want to be in the loop and they want to hear more as we go forward.
Well, I know, Mr. Shipp, that you're experienced and knowledgeable in this area, but I certainly encourage you and your client to really listen to the community. And I mean, not just hearing what they say and continue to move, but listen to the community and what their concerns are. So one of my initial concerns, and you touched on it, is traffic. And I know Mr. Guckert is here. I don't know if he's here for this application or not, but that 197 entrance, we're talking 400 plus dwelling units on this project. Is there any consideration in this early part of the planning of this for any kind of additional turning lane or anything from 197? It's any of that? I mean, we're talking 400 feet, 400 residents. Yeah, I have no doubt that he will. Yeah.
Good evening, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. It's been quite some time since I've been here, and I'm
Name and address, please, Wes.
certainly Wes Guckert, 9900 Franklin Square Drive, Baltimore 21236, President and CEO of the Traffic Group Inc.
Sir, could you pronounce your last name and spell it for me, please?
Sure.
I couldn't get it.
Guckert, Guckert.
Thank you.
Sure. In fact, I was informed this morning that the community had a concern about queuing along northbound 197 at Clubhouse Road. And we've taken a preliminary look at that, and there appears to be room to install a northbound right turn lane. And while that's not needed from a capacity point of view, a mathematical capacity point of view, it clearly is something that the community has indicated is a challenge. And I spoke with the developer, Mr. Cohen, earlier today, and we think that that's something that can be done. As a stormwater inlet, there is a large grass area, then there's a guardrail, and then it drops off quite significantly. But we think there's room to put in a right turn lane, and I'm also hoping that we can put in a sidewalk adjacent to the right turn lane up against the guardrail. So that's something that's not really needed from a traffic impact analysis point of view, but it's a real issue for the community that we think we can address. And although Bill Shipp did not talk about it just yet, we did receive a comment letter today from State Highway Administration where they've reviewed our study and concur with our finding. So this would be something that would be above and beyond what would normally be expected, but we understand the issue there, and I think Mr. Cohen is ready to take care of that.
Mr. Small, could I just add to
Yes,
that?
yes.
Because you brought up the point about listening. That's an example. That was something that came up Monday night.
Yeah.
We called Wes, he looked at it, and we were prepared to talk about that tonight. It's not done, but
Sure.
we heard it and we looked into it.
Okay. I know this is way early in discussion, but I want to, direct this towards our planners. Street widths within this project. I think we've experienced in some of our other projects where our streets are a bit narrow, particularly for the easy movement of emergency vehicles, snow moving equipment, et cetera. So I just note, and I'll bring it up again at a later date. Mr. Shipp, if you'll just tell us again, I think you mentioned it earlier, about the percentage of open space to the percentage of developed space in this project?
Please.
We changed, Fred, we changed the law, they have to be 32, I think,
Okay,
even at under. They're close to 30%.
30% open space.
It almost meets a single-family home now. Marty, we changed it, so they have to meet the standard roads, right? I'm talking about even under open space.
Mr. Smalls, I'm told that the entire site is about 194 acres and that 108 would be kept in open space.
See, that's
Excellent. Okay, all right, great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Shipp.
Thank you, Mr. Smalls. Ms. Nicholas.
Thank you. Councilman Smalls brought it up. The two biggest concerns are community and the community input and the traffic. He really asked the question. I was just wondering, I know there are two entrances and exits, but there won't be an additional lane to be a third entrance and exit, correct?
I think I understand your question. That's correct. We have the main entrance. We've dualized it. One of the things that does, in addition to, we think, making it more attractive, is that also helps with emergency situations, that if one lane were to get blocked, the other lane could be used, even if an emergency vehicle had to come the wrong way down the open lane. So that is a way to help increase the circulation through the site for not only general use, but for emergency situations.
Thank you. I may have more questions later.
Thank you, Ms. Nicholas. Mr. Sidnor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't have any questions at this time.
Okay. Mr. DeWalt.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Guthert, you're not part of the Maryland Department of Transportation, correct? Or state highways or anything like that? You're just here based on Mr. Cohen asked you to come here. Is that correct? So you don't have any input as far as actually what Maryland Department of Transportation or state highways would recommend to leave that traffic, correct? You're just doing it based on your training, knowledge, and experience?
Yes and no. I'm here as a consultant to Mr. Cohen.
Okay.
But the State Highway Administration, we prepared a report, submitted to the State Highway Administration. They've reviewed it and concur with our findings.
So you have that report with you that I could get a copy of that and see that that's what they recommend to alleviate the 450, at least 450 cars that are going to be coming out of that area?
Yes, sir. This report is already in the record.
Okay, I don't have that. I wasn't a council member when the regular council met with you, so I would like a copy of that just to see that. If you could get that to me.
Mr. DeWalt, this council has not met with the developer on this project. Understand that. This is our first exposure.
I'm not saying you did meet with them. I'm saying he came in, everybody knows Mr. Schiff. I don't know him. I don't know anybody here.
Okay, well, let me just explain the process, if I could. The developer has come and spoken to Christian. As part of the process, he must have a traffic study done. Traffic study can be done by the traffic group. There's several different companies out there that do those. Wes's company did the traffic study, then they're required to file that with the state. Then the state will come back and either say they concur or they don't concur. Okay? Now, in the process, it didn't show that there was additional capacity required, but it came up in a meeting, Mr. Shipp, with the, this past week, is that correct?
Monday night.
Okay. And Mr. Cohen, the developer, has said that they can probably meet that need. So understand there's a process that you go through in land use but Mr. West is actually working for the developer, and he's required to get a consultant to do the report that's filed with the city and filed with the state. Okay, there's a process.
Christian has the
If I could say, Mr. DeWalt, we work with Christian closely. We'll make sure that whatever she needs to get you copies, you'll have it.
I would like to have those copies. I also want to show you this map that I got. This map, the bottom half was cut off. Is this what you guys provided to the city to give us? Because the bottom half's cut off. And those pictures up there, I would like to have copies of all of those too, because a large portion of this, it seems like that you're just elaborating a lot on that 55 acres up in the top. You see where the bottom's cut off of this?
I don't know how that copy was formatted and printed, but
okay, well, that's what I
we sent
received.
over
I'm just letting you know. I would like a copy of that too, with the full
Again-
scale of that.
Again,
Because
Kristen
that's
has
important.
the complete presentation. so
Okay,
she'll get you-
because these pictures up on the screen, it's very hard to see them at times. And I wanted to make comment on that floodplain where you said there are existing homes with the blue that was in there in the floodplain already, the existing homes. I couldn't see that from my point of view, so I would like to see that because I didn't see any of the water going over those existing homes in the floodplain. So could I get a copy of that picture too eventually?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, thank
But
you.
again, it's not a question of water going over those homes. It's the floodplain.
The
map.
floodplain, that's correct.
It's
But
the
you
map.
showed it blue, and I didn't see any blue on the existing homes, and you stated that there was. Okay. All right. Like it needs to be done, it should have been done that before, but you're going to actually improve that even more, is what you're saying.
Yes, sir. We're hoping to address that situation. And what I understand the way it works is that FEMA obviously deals with the whole country. And so they do high-level mapping. And so we're drilling down to this neighborhood, to this location, giving them specific engineering, and plus changing the grading to address our site. But we will be submitting new maps, which will need to be approved by FEMA before we could get any permits or do anything out there.
Okay. The flood plan mitigation strategy, can I also get how that occurs and how that's built to prevent flooding in that area? I saw it in your review. I don't understand it because it's not very specific on exactly how it's built or what it's in. I mean, the obvious intention of it is to prevent flooding, but I would like to read more about that to see how that is implemented into this area to prevent that flooding.
We will get you more information on that. Also, I would say, though, that, again, at this level of concept, we don't have the final engineering for it, but we'll get you where we are right now.
Okay.
And then hopefully,
The
as we
more
move
information,
forward,
the better.
You'll get it before the next decision and certainly before any permits. So we'll
Okay.
make sure we get you information.
I came to Laurel in 1985 to begin my career here. Back then, they were just developing that area, and parts of it were finished at the time. My studies indicate that most of the people that move into a golf community, they're really not golfers. They're people that want open space. They want beautiful views. They want green space, which all my colleagues, including the mayor and everything, were all about keeping things green in Laurel. And I'm all about that too. And the whole thing is, you just said to me, you just said before, you said there's going to be no ball fields or no organized sports in there, so those open spaces aren't going to be able to fit those, which that troubles me to a certain degree. But north of Bear Branch, where it's very enunciated on here being 55 acres.
Yes, sir.
Have you been there, sir? Have you seen that area?
I have not personally been there.
Okay. I've been there probably hundreds of
We heard
times.
Monday night there's actually a trail over there. Is that
What's
right?
that?
We heard Monday night there might actually be a trail over there.
No, it's a very old trail that has trees over it now and everything like that. Okay. There used to be a somewhat trail going along Bear Branch from Springhouse Apartments.
Okay.
There's no way you can get across Bear Branch to even utilize that area over there, that 55 acres. It's also pretty much a swampy area. I doubt if there could ever be any development in that 55 acres anyway. But your property's going right up to Bear Branch, and you're enunciating pretty regularly about this 55 acres you're going to keep as a forest land. I'm not saying that I don't think it can be developed anyway. So that part of the property should even be out of the equation anyway for being open space area, because I don't think there's any development you could put in there in the first place. Plus, anybody that moves into your community will not be able to get across that river anyway, because there's no way to get across that river, and you wouldn't want to go over there anyway because it's all swamp area.
I hear what you're saying.
If you've never been there, that's about the best I could explain it.
I think you work for that. But I would say that there's different concepts of open space, and of course keeping the forested edges around this property has a beneficial impact, not only in terms of aesthetics, but also in terms of the environment and the protection of Bear Branch and the protection of the Patuxent. So it serves a purpose. It's not going to be housing. You're right. But it is part of the open space parcels that exist now. And I also want to say one thing to one of your comments. When I said we're not programming ball fields and structured or organized league-type play areas, we do envision having pocket parks where there might be play equipment for kids. But one of the things that came out Monday night in our discussions, and this is just a sample of the community, not the whole community, but they didn't want ball fields back there that would become an area where people would come in for league play and that type of thing. Now, again, this is just, we're taking it in. If by the time we get to the real design phase, people think there should be a ball field, maybe we could fit something in there. But, I hear your comment, but I wanted to explain why I said that.
Here's the other issue as far as keeping Laurel green, which I'm totally for, trying to keep any areas green. We have a lot of development that's going on in Laurel right now, and several places that have been just completed. We have another development coming in. We actually had a trucking firm go out of business, which that property was for sale at one time, and there was supposed to be development on there. Now, if anybody would have bought that property and developed on that property, they would have had no problems due to the fact that they wouldn't be disturbing anything. But you, in your vision here, because you can't build on that 55 acres, everything's going to be concentrated where these other people have lived for over 30 years. And they've had a beautiful view. It's gorgeous down there. They have bald eagles. They have cranes, all different types of turtles in those ponds. Everything around there is absolutely beautiful, and that's going to be all pretty much gone when you come in there, especially their view. You're backing up houses right to the back of their houses. Their backyard is not going to be looking at green space that we treasure here in Laurel and that we want. They're going to be looking at more existing homes and more noise. And the estimates I get when I did my studies as far as when you develop a golf area, the existing homes in that area go down in value between 15 and 20%.
I'd be interested to see the backup for that, because we think property values will go up.
That you're just guessing on that. You're guessing on a lot of this flood stuff too, aren't you?
No,
No?
we have solid.
What about the total number of houses? Because I keep hearing there might not be 450, there might be a little more. How does that, because of your engineering aspects of it and things like that when you get down there to building? So we don't have a definitive answer on that either, do we?
Well, again, if I could refer to the stage that we're at. We're really at the conceptual stage of requesting an amendment to the PUD. The PUD, within the existing approved area, has a range of density that's allowed. We fit our plan within that range. We targeted that out based upon the development envelope that we see, and that translated into a maximum of 450. We think it's going to be less. We know it's going to be less.
I keep hearing that.
But, until we get to a site plan and you see actual lots laid out on a site that's been fully engineered, I can't tell you the exact number, but I can tell you that it won't be more than 450 because we're only asking for that much in terms of a maximum, but it will be less than 450.
During my career here in Laurel, and I've been here 32 years now, there were 3 major floods in that area. One of the floods, I took a boat from right by the clubhouse all the way almost to hole number 17, which is almost at the end of the golf course, and that was just a rowboat taking it down there. I don't see how you're going to give any guarantees whatsoever as far as the flooding goes in that area, no matter what you develop. That's why I'm very interested in learning about this flood plan mitigation strategy that's listed in your the brochure that I got. As far as the traffic on Route 197, we have experienced several fatals just before the area of 198 coming up 197. In fact, when I was leaving Springhouse Apartments one evening, I was struck in the rear by a drunk driver doing about 80 mile an hour that hit the back of my truck. That 197 in that stretch, it's very high speeds and there's a lot of accidents there. And now you're proposing to put 450 houses, townhouses in there, and each one of them is at least going to have 1 car. And to get them out onto 197 safely, I found that very, very hard to believe too. Just so you know my opinion on that.
I understand. And I would say it's not all townhouses.
Are you going to be, in order to prevent this flooding and to do what you want to do as far as building on there, is there going to be a lot of backfilling into the area itself?
Essentially, the site will be graded and balanced within itself so that the soil in the lower areas will be redesigned and brought up to the higher area, and it will be leveled off. So we're not envisioning that we would be trucking in soil, but that the area closer to the existing development, where we're identifying development pods, would be leveled to a level outside of the floodplain. It would not be higher than the existing neighborhood, and then the space lower down would be lower than it is now, which would help retain water down there in a flood event. that in a very layman's way is the theory, but there will be a lot of engineering behind it. And I would say in terms of assurances about how this works and whether you have faith in government or not, I would say that this is one of the areas that's looked at very closely and would have to be reviewed by your public works, would have to be reviewed by the state of Maryland and their folks at MDE. And if there's any issues that involve the Corps of Engineers, would be reviewed by them as well.
Has
And
Maryland
ultimately by
Depart-
VEMA.
Has the Maryland Department of Environment done their study or their review of this proposal?
Not yet, because we don't have a specific layout, but we would not get a permit to do anything until they've signed off.
Knowing all that you know, I mean, your meetings with the public didn't seem like, honestly, the way you perceived that the people were reacting, it didn't seem like they were very favorable. They had a lot of questions, just like I have a lot of questions to you, and I'll have probably a lot more. When I ran my campaign, a lot of people in that area were totally different than what you're projecting here. They were totally against anything like that because of the reasons I tell you, and rightfully so. When you got a development moving into an area with it, they have been living there for over 30 years, and now it's going to be developed with over 450 units, and there is a lot of problems with that, not only for the green space, but with the traffic, the strain that it's going to put on public safety personnel and everything. My whole point is that when you guys if you ever do get this approved, and once it's completely done, 10 years from that, when that place floods, you know who they're going to call? They're going to be calling to the city to come down and take care of the matter because this place has flooded. And if you can't give some honest guarantees on that place not flooding, I don't want to be the one responsible for saying, okay, everything in here is perfectly fine, I'll give you the okay on this, unless I could see a lot more that you can present to me that is going to convince me to vote for anything like this. I would rather keep it green. I don't care about the economy of the golf courses because that's up and down all the time. It just happens to be in a down state right now. It always comes back, and it always comes back bigger than ever. And the whole thing is, I would rather see green space in there other than having buildings put in there. When I know that in 10 or 15 years, if a flood comes in there, they're going to be calling my people.
I heard your statement. I didn't
Thank you.
question it. We certainly will continue to work to give information to the city and the staff on all of the technical issues that you raised, because we want them to be comfortable with the engineering that we're doing so that they can advise you properly on it. And we look forward to working with you and the entire council on that. I also would say, the golf course is not going to be there indefinitely, and that's one thing I can My client at the beginning did state that the golf course would not be in operation indefinitely.
I'm sorry.
What Mr. Shipp has stated, that the golf course will not be in operation indefinitely. The golf course has been losing money since 1958. People need to realize. Are you done, Mr. DeWalt?
I'd like to comment on that too. So you never even though you were purchasing a golf course, you never even considered maybe keeping it 9-hole or anything like that. That was never in your plans at all. Even though that would only take up a certain percentage of the acreage on there, and it would probably still be very profitable to build around those 9 holes possibly, but you never considered that. Because am I allowed to ask what the value of this what the property is going to cost to furnish and what it's going to net the owner? Do you have an approximate on that or not?
No.
Okay. I was just curious. Thank you.
Let me make a couple comments, and the mayor's going to make a couple comments. Laurel Pines was there in the early 60s because I attended some events there. It was just a golf course that had followed a racetrack that existed in 1925 that lost money. And in the 60s, early 60s, I remember speaking to a local business person. The golf course was losing money then. It was not making money. Now, I don't know what it costs to run a golf course, but I do know this. The company that has owned the golf course recently, that's what they do. They own golf courses. They're in the business, and if anybody's going to make money, they're going to do it. They turned around and sold to the city the swimming pool, the cabana, and the tennis court. They thought they would get out of a load, a capital load, so they sold to the city. We picked it up as a recreation feature for the city. We added a swimming pool. The golf courses, this is not Trump. As Mr. DeWalt pointed out, the property that is considered passive green space is exactly that. It is swampy back there. It's stagnant water, and that has value to the watershed. We've got stagnant water all along the Patuxent River. It has value in that it filters some things out that would not get filtered out. Okay, so it has value. And when it says passive, it means exactly that. Just like the other side of the Patuxent River across from Riverfront Park is passive. They're considered passive green space areas, and they count. Now, that said, this is an early concept plan. The 450 homes, as I understand it, in reading this, were the maximum number of homes that the engineers felt could be built on the property given the current zoning. And they'll have to come back. They've got a lot of hurdles to jump through. They not only have to deal with FEMA on floodplain issues, they're going to have to talk to the Corps of Engineers because this borders the Bear Branch. They're going to have to talk to Prince George's County because they control the stormwater in the ponds. There's a lot of water being pumped around on the golf course right now. A couple years ago, we had the golf course, we had a company in here, but they were in here at the behest of the golf course so that they could put solar panels in so they could cut their electric cost in pumping the water. And that was turned down because that's not a permitted use by right. And the council said, okay, we're going to study it, but we're not going to allow it. There's a lot of work that has to go into here. I would not attempt to imagine the grading that will go on this property to create the downhill slope that they'll be looking at. And because it's going to be going down to the Bear Branch, that's when the Corps of Engineers is going to get involved. So there's a lot of hurdles that have to be jumped through. Now, let me just mention 197. People have been killed crossing the street in front of the 7-Eleven. They just walk out in front of cars. There's another problem at the entrance to the golf course because it's an uphill. If you're coming from Bowie, it's uphill, and people have trouble seeing the cars coming up the hill. So they're trying to make a left turn. That's a signal issue. It's an extra lane issue. And what I heard was they're going to look at that issue and see if they can't mitigate that, because it's dangerous now. I've turned left, especially at dusk. So that's an issue that'll have to be addressed. Even though Wes said it's not in the required, the developers said they're going to do that. We take every opportunity we can to improve traffic in Laurel. The last thing is, I want to impress upon everybody, I've only been involved in land use in the city for about 37 years. This is an early concept plan. Planning Commission's going to get their shot at it. Planning Department, Corps of Engineers, FEMA, Prince George's County. Going to be all kinds of reviews that go into this before they push the first shovel full of dirt over there. This is not different than went on with the Goody property at Laurel Lakes. It is not different than what went on with this property when Mr. Ledoux and Mr. Miller bought it, and they built the original apartments, fourplexes, single-family homes, and the 2 office buildings. So there's a lot of work that goes on. And I don't know what the total number will be, 450 or 420 or 400. And they're going to be required to do a lot of landscaping because what they're doing is there's an afforestation requirement. And the developer knows he's starting out with the property that doesn't have a lot of landscaping on it, so he's going to have to install a lot of landscaping and buffering. So again, I appreciate the concept plan. And I think what happened, Carl, Mr. DeWalt, is when they made the copies that we got, they cut the bottom off. I'm sure that Christian has the full copy of some of these plans back in her office.
The council will get the full plans, and you guys will also receive the staff report that will be generated to the
Right,
planning
appreciate
commission.
that. Okay.
Planning Commission.
After the planning
After the
commission.
planning commission sees this,
Right.
okay.
So there's more information to
Okay.
come, a lot more.
And then there's public hearings at planning commission meetings, there's public hearings at mayor and city council meetings, we consider the legislation at the council meetings. So there's an awful lot that the developer's got to go through before he gets to push the first shovel full of dirt. And just so that, to clarify, Mr. Cohen was he bought the truck depot. He was originally going to develop that property, and he has sold that now. Is that correct, Mr. Cohen? Okay. And that's going to be refurbed, as I understand it, back to a truck depot.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we're going to put that back on the tax rolls. Appreciate that.
Already is.
Okay. Well, we're going to get more money. Okay. With that, I'll let, that's all I have. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a couple things, because I don't want the general public that may be watching to be confused. There is, as you heard the president say, quite a few hurdles here to do. First off, I want to point out, everybody keeps throwing numbers around. This is in the staff report or the justification, it says up to 450 units. There is a long way to go. There is community meetings. There is every department in the city has to review this. And Department of Park and Recs may say they want a certain amount of parks and all of that. That's why it says up to 450 units. You could be down to 380 or 400 or whatever it may be by the time all departments report. That's as we move closer to a more site plan review that gets into more detail that I think everybody keeps talking about. So, as you heard the president say, the solar array, I guess it's been a couple of years now, losing track. I was always very concerned about the golf course. It's no secret, the owners of the golf course years ago approached the city about buying the golf course. Every mayor I spoke to said, "Are you crazy? Do not get in that business," from a city standpoint. We looked at the pool, we looked at the parkland, as you've heard, and we took that on as well. So it was just too much for city our size, and for the environmental reasons and other things, most just said stay away from that. So we did. I was always, as I said, concerned because I know that the golf course was looking for other ways to make money. I don't know what their book said. I don't know if they were making money, losing money. I can tell you what people have told me, but that's really not my issue. My issue is to make sure that first off, the developer communicates with the community there. There are numerous organizations, there are people that this will affect. We need to make sure that that's communicated to him. We will offer City Hall here as well, if you will want to have a meeting with all. I know you have facilities down there as well, but people that can't make it, it can be televised. We can work that through our Department of Communications, but we'd offer that to you as well as you move forward. I did also want to report, I had met with Mr. Cohen several months ago. That he had and was interested in trying to do apartments. And I said, we don't want any more apartments. And I can tell you that what I've seen with the bubble plan, there are no apartments there, and I appreciate that. Again, we have a long way to go, and I think that was a commitment. And that, to me, shows that he was listening. And I appreciated that, because I said Laurel is inundated with apartments. We need to move away from that. So that's where you're seeing this number jump as well, because they need to make things viable for their project. What I would like to ask is that both of the intersections, and I know the traffic group has looked at them, I'd like for you to take a look at those, a real hard look at both of those intersections, both intersections.
Which one,
I'd be
Mr. Mayor?
at Greenview and then down.
Apartments are.
Yeah, what's the name of the street? I just lost the name of it.
Greenview and Clubhouse
Yeah,
Boulevard.
Clubhouse, yeah, Clubhouse, thank you. Clubhouse, but I'd like for you to take a look at both of those intersections
Yes, sir.
and see, can some redesign be made? Listen, we've had issues with 197 forever. We send numerous letters and get nice letters back, quite frankly, and we don't control the intersections, but there are improvements that need to be made there, as well as the entire piece of the road there we need to do something about. So I'd ask you to take a look at that and come back to us as well. I would encourage you to make sure we have a lot of buffering in between the homes. And where your bubble plan is, if there's single-family homes in the current residence that butt your property, it would be nice to make sure that it's either buffered or that it backs up to a house, not a townhome or others.
And that's what we want to do.
Or,
Yes, sir.
so take a look at that. The floodplain issue, as we move forward, and both Mr. Sidnor and Mr. DeWalt will be briefed on from our Department of Emergency Management. One of those things is floodplain. Steve Allen, who has taken this on and worked very hard for the communities down in that area regarding the 100-year floodplain and the 500-year and what is done with that. He has worked real well, understands, and will be briefing them as well and giving them a lot of information as well. But as we move forward, as yours is submitted to the city, we will make sure that people understand that as well. It is not an easy subject. I've listened to it. I've had to deal with some of the attorneys in that area as well. And we are going to make sure whatever project is there, that it benefits the community. And that means that the runoff, and I want to make sure people understand too, as we talk about runoff, and it may go down and into the pond, we're not talking about a cliff. It all has to be graded properly. It's just not this big cliff where you're going to see water go running off. All that has to be done by soil conservation. You got Corps, you got all sorts of people that are going to be involved with that. But the other thing is in the area, is the passive parks and the wooded area. I'd be interested to find out on the wooded area whether nature trails and things like that can be added in through that. We are looking at some of the property on the other side where we're doing some nature trails and other things. We want to make sure that if something occurs there and you move forward with this, that all of the trail systems come together. And we're hooking Main Street and all those others up that will eventually end up over onto 197 for people to be able to, walk and ride. So that it's important.
We did see mention of that in the Parks memo. We have a trail network, as I mentioned, throughout our property plan in the back. so that people would be able to interact with that passive open space area. And then we did get the memo from Parks Department, which mentioned this master plan of doing trail linkages, and we'd love to find a way to connect to the city's trail network.
And I just want to remind and encourage those that may be listening in the audience, Christian Pulley, who is the director, there is a file that must be maintained. All of that information is available to the public. No one's hiding anything. No one's going to hide anything from anyone. We want to engage the community and be involved, and I think Mr. Cohen and Mr. Shipp, if you've heard, is attempting to do that. But we still have many things, and we're going to need input from the community and everyone involved. So I encourage you to go and talk to Christian. You can also get on her list, and she'll make sure that emails are sent to you as well. So with that said, Mr. President, that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. With that said, Smalls, we ready to take this to the next meeting of the Mayor and City Council?
Yes, I'm fine with
For
that.
the first hearing.
Yes.
Ms. Nicholas?
Yes.
Mr. Sidnor?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. DeWalt?
Explain that to me, President.
It'll be introduced and we'll have a public hearing at the next Mayor and City Council meeting on this agenda item.
Can we, excuse me, is that put in a question form so I could say yes, no, or
You can say no if you want, yes or no.
Okay, no.
Okay. We have 4 council members saying we should take this to the council meeting for a public hearing, and we will do that. The next public hearing, Mayor and City Council meeting, will be December 11th, 2017 at 7 p.m. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Mayor, members of
Move to agenda item number 2, ordinance number 1925, an ordinance of the Mayor and City Council to approve the neo-traditional overlay conceptual site plan for the Flester property known as 7041 Contee Road, Laurel, Maryland, and providing for an effective date. Read the ordinance. Christian, you have the floor.
Hi, good evening again. The applicant strip matter is seeking concept neo-traditional overlay site plan approval to construct the townhouse community with 180 dwelling units for the Flester property, which is located at 7041 Contee Road. This property, along with another property, the Kaufman property, was annexed into the city this year. The site has 26.67 acres of land. However, only 22.9 acres is proposed for residential development. The remaining land of the property will be devoted to open space. Also, subject property address 7051 Contee Road was annexed into the city, and the Kaufman property consists of approximately 6.072 acres and is zoned R5. This parcel will be constructed into an athletic field and deeded to the city. However, this parcel is not a part of this application. Thank you.
Questions of Christian? Ms. Nicholas?
Did I hear you say 7051 was annexed in?
It was 7041 and 7051 Contee Road. Both of those parcels, as listed up there, the overhead, were annexed into the city in July and went into effect in September.
Thank you, Ms. Nicholas.
Excuse me, Mr. President, could I ask Christian a question?
I'm going to get to you.
Okay.
Mr. Sidnor?
I don't have any questions, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Sidnor. Mr. DeWalt?
Christian, I didn't hear that. Did you say there was going to be a ball field in there too?
Yes, sir. Part of the parcel for the smaller one is going to be an athletic field, constructed as an athletic field that will be deeded to the city once it's constructed.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. DeWalt?
No, sir.
Thank you, appreciate it. Mr. Smalls?
I have no questions.
Okay. In agreement to take this to the Mayor and City Council meeting, Ms. Nicholas?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Sidnor?
Yes, Mr. President.
Thank you, sir. Mr. DeWalt?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Smalls?
Yes.
Okay, this will be introduced with first public hearing at the Mayor and City Council meeting on Monday, December 11th, 2017 at 7 p.m. Move to agenda item number 3, ordinance number 1926, an ordinance to amend the City of Laurel Code, the Code of the City of Laurel, Chapter 2 Administration, Article 9, Community Redevelopment Authority, Section 2.186.1, Membership. I've read the title of the ordinance into the record. This ordinance was introduced at the last Mayor and City Council meeting. Mayor?
Yeah, and I think I've spoke to everyone regarding this. This is some changes to the ordinance. We want to submit former Councilmember Crary to this. She has been chair of the Community Redevelopment Authority. I think gives good continuity, and we need to make the changes before I can make the appointment, which I would like to do after this is approved, so with council's concurrence. I'll answer any questions anybody may have.
Thank you, Mayor. Does anybody have any questions of the mayor? Okay, we prepared to take this back to the Mayor and City Council meeting. Mr. Sidnor?
Yes, Mr. President.
Thank you, sir. Mr. DeWalt?
Yes.
Mr. Smalls?
I'm fine with this, Mr. President.
Thank you. Ms. Nicholas?
Yes.
Okay, it'll be on the agenda for possible action at the Mayor and City Council meeting on Monday, December 11th, 2017 at 7 p.m. Move to agenda item number 4, ordinance number 1927, an ordinance of the Mayor and City Council of Laurel amending the Code of the City of Laurel, Chapter 16, Taxation, to add Section 16-10, establishing an elderly and veteran real property tax credit program. Read the title of the ordinance. Michelle, you have the floor.
I got it, Mike.
Okay, I'm sorry. Mayor's going to present.
She can jump in. Thank you. As you're well aware, we've been working on this tax credit as well as the other for almost 8 months now. We had to do some research. Still kind of disappointed on what the state require. It's state requirement, right, on the 40 years? Yeah. But this would be a tax credit for the elderly and veteran. You can see the eligibility really is for a 10% for up to 5 years tax credit, as long as they remain in compliance with the city's property code. It talks about when it would commence on December of 2018. The other piece of this would allow the mayor and council through budget processing, when we do the budget, to be able to tell how much of a tax credit we may want to give for that year. So that's how, Michelle, you okay with that? And I think we discussed it prior to this.
That works for us.
So it would be done through the budget process, such as we do through the tax credit for the Historical District Commission as well.
As well as the foreclosed property.
Foreclosed, I'm sorry, yes. So, but that's how we would do it. So in my proposed budget, we would show a tax credit or a deduction of, a couple $1,000s, depending on what it may be, for each of the tax credits that we're talking about here. And it would be up to for 5 years. They would have to come in, they'd have to submit the application for the tax credit. And I think it's also fair to say, Ms. Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, we've been doing this with the foreclosure as well as with the HDC, and it seems to have worked out well. And we've kind of incorporated that into this as well.
Yes, sir. The revenue coordinator in our office has the system already worked out based on the foreclosed properties, which is a multi-year credit as long as the residence remains owner-occupied for that time. They have to each year provide proof that they are still in the property, because obviously they'll still show in SDAT that they're owners, but we have to have proof that they're living in the residence as well. So she's got the system all worked out, so we're confident that we can administer this program as well.
Don't go away, Michelle. I just have one question before I open it up. Whereas the credit that the elderly can get, that's means tested, outside of, if you look at the one that they fill out the application for, that's income means tested, correct? This is not.
No, this would just
This is
simply
only
be
based on the value of the property. Have they lived there for 40 years? Are they 65 years of age? Are they a veteran? Okay, because we've got two different situations here, correct?
Right.
So there's no means based. So this, sometimes those people that are senior citizens are right at the edge, but they don't fall into the poverty
Right.
category, so they're not able to get that credit. Okay, good, excellent.
Pretty much flat, right up.
Yeah, great. Questions of Michelle? Mr. DeWalt?
Yes, sir. Michelle, the 40 years in the house, in the same dwelling, 65 years old, the 40 years they have to be in the dwelling, that's state mandated?
Yes.
Yes.
That can't be lowered by us under no circumstance?
That's why it's taken us 8 months.
Do we have anybody that qualifies for that?
Yeah.
Sure, I do.
We've come up with a,
Other than Mike? I knew Mike probably did because Mike's been here a while, but is there any other people in Laurel that?
Yes.
just throwing some names around, we've come up with a list of at least 7 that I'm aware of, but
There's a couple on
that's
Prince
just
George
people-
Street,
that's just
Carl.
people I
There
know.
is.
There are a couple of on Prince George Street.
So that can never be lowered at any point unless the state
Unless
does
the
it?
state lowers the enabling
I got you.
legislation.
Okay, thank you.
We did look to try to provide the fiscal impact of this. The county provides a disabled veterans tax credit.
Right.
So it's combined. They provided us with their list, and the grand total of the tax credits is only $20,000 for the whole county.
I do want to point out one thing. I want to make sure everybody does understand this tax credit only goes towards the city of Laurel's tax base portion of the tax.
Okay,
Question.
Mr. Sidnor.
Yes, if the state changed this, right, would a person be able, let's say for an example, hypothetically, right, the state changed this, we go back to the state some reason, and the state changed it to 25 years, and would the person be able to still qualify for that that's already in the house already? Can you like reset? That's my question.
We would have to come back and amend our ordinance if the state changed it.
Okay. Yeah, that was my biggest concern. It's like, great idea, but the state mandated this, so we got to go back to the state and change. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Sidnor. Ms. Nicholas.
My question's already been answered.
Thank you. Mr. Smalls.
Just 2 real quick ones. Michelle, what would be the maximum benefit to the participant in this in terms of tax credit? There a dollar amount that would be the maximum benefit? I know the mayor, I think you mentioned a couple of thousand.
That was on the budgeting process, but corporate limits, the city of Laurel has maximum, it would be 300, well, that's under the 350,000.
Right.
But it's based on their value of the house or the property, and then it's over, it's up to 5 years. So you might give 2 years, you may give 1 year, and then it's all, from our standpoint, would be on how we budget. If it was a tight budget year, you may only give the tax credits that are already out there. We may end up saying, we're not going to offer, any this year. So you got to calculate for that up to 5 years.
And so with what the mayor just said, then that sort of,
She's got her calculator going, I know what you mean.
as far as the fiscal impact to the city, there'd be minimal based on the way the mayor just described it.
Yep.
Because there may be years where the credit varies from year to year.
Right, it will be based on the assessment of the property up to a $350,000 maximum assessment. So on a $350,000 home, the tax credit would be $248.
A lot of money.
Got it. Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Smalls. All right, we in agreement, we'll take this to the council meeting on Monday, December 11th, 2017. Mr. Smalls?
Yes.
Ms. Nicholas?
Yes.
Mr. Sidnor?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. DeWalt?
Yes.
Thank you. Move to agenda item number 5, ordinance number 1928, an ordinance of the mayor and city council of Laurel amending the code of the city of Laurel, chapter 16, taxation, to add section 16-11, establishing a public safety officer real property tax credit program. Read the title of the ordinance. Is Michelle going to do this, or are you going to do it, Mayor?
I mean, pretty self-explanatory. It's for a public safety official, officer, real property tax credit, firefighter, emergency medical technician, a correctional officer, police officer, a deputy sheriff who resides in the city of Laurel and is employed full-time by a public safety agency located within the corporate city boundaries. And we did include the volunteer firefighter who resides in the city of Laurel or volunteers for a public safety agency located. So that would pick up your Laurel Volunteer Fire Department and Laurel Volunteer Rescue Squad as well. You know, and I'm just sitting here thinking, what about a CERT member?
Well,
Forgot about that.
Mayor, but a certain member may not be sworn. There may be a requirement in the enabling legislation. This was enabling legislation that allows this, doesn't it? Karen?
Yes, sir. So section is 9259, I believe it is, of the tax property article, is where we get the parameters of the tax credit that we can do. And so it's section 260. So public safety officers is a defined term in the state law, and that is the only group to which we are allowed to offer the tax credit. And so we picked up the exact definition from state law, and that's in your ordinance, and we really can't alter that. So it would depend on whether your CERT members would fit within the definition of firefighter, emergency medical technician, correctional officer, police officer, or a deputy sheriff employed full-time by a public safety agency, or a volunteer firefighter for a public safety agency.
I would just ask, because again, I'm sorry, I should have picked up on this earlier, that we just confirm that and make sure.
Okay.
I mean, I don't want to hold this up, but I just think we should take a look at that.
It's a good point.
Thank you. And that's, it's a $2,500, I mean, it's all right there.
$2,500 for 5 years. Up to $2,500 for 5 years. Okay, questions, Mr. Smalls? I'm sorry, do you have anything else, Michelle? I'm sorry.
no, sir, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Smalls.
I have no questions.
Thank you. Ms. Nicholas?
No questions?
Mr. Sidnor?
No questions.
Mr. DeWalt?
I have one. I'm assuming this verbiage that's on here is just the verbiage that's authorized by the state, because we don't have a correctional
Right.
facility or anything like that within the city.
And the reason we retain that language was just because you never know what's going to happen in the future, and they wouldn't have to go back and
Okay.
worry about changing it. We were just trying to capture everything that was allowed under state law.
So no retirees in it here?
That's not how it's worded now.
You know, a long time ago, they were offering $500 to move into the city for policemen. And I had already been in the city, and I lived here. I worked 28 years, and I kept applying to every mayor to try to get that $500, and I kept getting denied. Although I ended up working for 28 years, so I never got that 500. Now I'll miss out on this one
I
too.
told you to move out and move down.
Anything else, Mr. DeWalt?
No, thank you.
Thank you. All right. For an agreement, we'll introduce this at the mayor and city, we'll introduce this with the first public hearing at the mayor and city council meeting on Monday, December 11th, 2017 at 7 p.m. That concludes our agenda.
Are you going to have one meeting?
Before we leave,
We're talking about in December, they I'm sorry, December of 18. I'm thinking of something different.
We have one meeting in December, correct? Okay, does anything have to be done before the end of the year?
Marty, you all have anything?
Any one of these agenda items?
No, I was thinking it was.
No, I understand that, but
Mr. President,
yes.
we've already accounted for the timeline with the ordinances that Christian presented this evening.
Okay, so we can take those into January.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're meeting our time requirements. Okay, meeting's adjourned.